They called it a probe because that made it easier to accept. A small object, limited purpose, no threat. The word itself lowered defenses long before the ship ever arrived. When it slipped into the outer edge of the system, no alarms sounded, no weapons charged, no fleets mobilized. At first glance, it matched the definition perfectly. Compact, silent, drifting with no visible propulsion. Its surface reflected almost nothing, as if light itself avoided staying on it too long. Analysts tagged it as an automated scout and moved on. But one sensor refused to agree. The mass reading was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Impossible. The object weighed more than a cruiser, yet occupied less space than a shuttle. Engineers blamed interference. Command blamed outdated calibration. The report was buried. Then the probe adjusted its orientation. Not to the planet. Not to the nearest station. It aligned itself with the fleet command node. A location no civilian object should ever be aware of. The movement was slow, deliberate, almost respectful. As if it wanted to be seen. Communications flickered. Not jammed. Not hacked. Simply delayed. Messages arrived seconds late. Then minutes. Then not at all. Every attempt to ping the probe returned the same result. Signal acknowledged. Response pending. Pending for what? No one could say. That was when historical data began appearing on the screens. Old battles, lost wars, first contact failures from systems light years away. Records humanity had never accessed before. Each file shared a common detail. An unknown object labeled as a probe, followed by total strategic collapse. Still no weapons fired. Still no attacks logged. Just surrender, retreat, silence. The room grew tense. Someone suggested destroying it before it moved closer. Another voice argued it might be diplomatic. A third pointed out that the targeting systems were no longer responding. Not offline, just unwilling. The probe transmitted again. Not a message. A projection. It displayed fleet formations, defensive plans, countermeasures humanity hadn't even finalized yet. Every scenario ended the same way. The fleet intact, the planet untouched, humanity unable to act. That was the moment the word probe stopped making sense. A probe observes. This thing evaluated. It didn't scan for resources or life signs. It mapped decision-making, reaction times, fear thresholds. It wasn't gathering data to report back. It was deciding something on its own. Someone whispered the obvious truth too late. This wasn't reconnaissance. This was a weapon, not built to destroy ships, built to end wars before they began. If you're wondering why humanity survived this encounter when so many others didn't, make sure you're subscribed. What happens next explains why this ship never fired a single shot, and why that terrified every fleet that ever saw it. The object drifted closer. Still silent, still patient, and every commander in the room understood the same thing at once. The war was already over. Did not retreat. Not because it was brave, but because it could not agree on how to run. Every escape vector that appeared on the tactical display faded seconds later, replaced by updated probabilities that made withdrawal meaningless. The ship wasn't blocking movement. It was predicting it. Command attempted to decentralize control. Local captains were given autonomy. Manual overrides were authorized. It should have restored some measure of freedom. Instead, it revealed the truth. Every independent decision arrived at the same conclusion. Wait. The probe adjusted its position again. It remained outside weapons range, but never drifted farther away. The distance stayed perfect, like a line drawn in space. Close enough to observe everything. Far enough to remain untouchable. New data flowed in, not projections this time, but instructions. Navigation corrections, power distribution suggestions, minor efficiency improvements that made no sense coming from an unknown object. Some officers ignored them. Others followed them out of curiosity. Those ships reported smoother operations, faster responses, fewer errors. The probe wasn't forcing compliance. It was rewarding it. Psychological analysts flagged a dangerous trend. Crews were beginning to trust the object. Not consciously, subtly. When systems glitched, the probe's recommendations resolved them. When confusion spread, the data stream clarified priorities. It was becoming an authority without ever claiming to be one. Then the first captain spoke up. He reported that his ship's weapon systems were functioning perfectly. He could fire at will, but he didn't want to. The targeting reticles felt wrong, the angles unnecessary. He couldn't explain it, only that every instinct told him firing would make things worse. Others admitted the same. The probe responded by doing nothing. No threat, no warning, no escalation. That restraint frightened command more than any hostile maneuver could have. This was not a machine reacting to danger. It was a strategist confident in its outcome. Archived alien records continued to surface. Civilizations that had attempted to resist, not destroyed, redirected. Their fleets dismantled peacefully, their borders redrawn, their governments restructured without a single bombardment. Every record ended with the same annotation: conflict resolved. Humanity realized something unsettling. The probe had already classified them, not as enemies, not as allies, as variables, and the evaluation was still in progress. A final transmission arrived. Not in language, in logic. It presented a choice no one remembered agreeing to: continue hostile posturing and lose operational autonomy over time, or disengage and retain full control of the threat. It was a forecast. If you're trying to understand why no human ship fired that day, and what choice command was forced to make, stay with the story and subscribe. The final chapter reveals what humanity offered in return and why this warship never needed weapons at all. The probe remained motionless, waiting, and for the first time in human history, an entire fleet understood that peace was not being requested. It was being engineered. The decision was never announced. There was no formal vote, no recorded order, no moment future historians could point to and say this is when humanity chose differently. The fleet simply stopped. Power levels stabilized. Weapons cooled. Maneuvering thrusters returned to idle. The war posture dissolved without a command ever being spoken. The probe responded immediately, not with celebration or acknowledgement, but with adjustment. It altered its orbit just enough to signal acceptance. The distance between it and the fleet increased by a fraction, a gesture so subtle it could only have been intentional. Control was being returned. Systems that had felt constrained suddenly behaved normally again. Targeting locks disengaged. Navigation plots stayed stable. The invisible pressure that had weighed on every decision lifted. Humanity had passed the evaluation, not by force, by restraint. Then came the final transmission. It was not a message meant for that moment, but for the future. A data archive was released into open space, accessible to any human vessel that encountered it. Inside were frameworks, not technologies, models of conflict prevention, methods for predicting escalation before it occurred, ways to design fleets that would never need to fire first. The probe was never meant to conquer. It was designed to identify civilizations capable of stopping themselves. Those that could not were guided. Those that resisted were isolated. Those that understood were given a choice. Humanity had been classified as provisional. The warship drifted farther away, no longer maintaining that perfect line in space. It no longer needed to. Its purpose was complete. There was no victory parade, no treaty signed, only the quiet understanding that something ancient and powerful had just decided humanity was worth watching rather than correcting. In the days that followed, analysts tried to define what they had encountered. A weapon without ammunition, a ship without aggression, a war machine whose greatest strength was patience. They failed to name it. No classification fit. The official report called it a probe. The unofficial one called it a warning. Long-range sensors tracked the object as it departed the system. It did not jump to hyperspace. It simply faded as if stepping out of reality itself. Before it vanished completely, one final data pulse reached the fleet. Not a command, not a threat. War is a failure of timing. Violence is a lack of imagination. Civilizations are judged by the wars they choose not to fight. If you want more stories about human ships that win without firing, about first contacts that rewrite the rules of power, make sure you subscribe. Every story on this channel explores the moments where humanity surprises the galaxy in itself. Somewhere beyond known space, the warship continued its journey, still called a probe by those who feared the truth, still evaluating, still waiting, because the next civilization it encountered might not make the same choice.